Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Littlefinger uttered this phrase with such confidence that it became one of the most quoted lines in the entire universe. But here's the interesting part. He was wrong. The ladder he had been building for 30 years eventually collapsed beneath his feet. And not because someone turned out to be smarter or luckier, but because the very construction of that ladder had a hidden flaw from the start. Not on the outside, on the inside. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that was. Because Peter Baelish didn't lose in the finale. He had been losing since his very first move. It's just that for a long time, no one noticed. If you look at Littlefinger only through the show, it's easy to form a simple picture. A clever schemer who pulled the strings until he was finally caught at the scene of the crime. But that's a superficial reading. Littlefinger is more complex, darker, and in a sense, more tragic than he appears at first glance. And to understand why, we need to go back to the very beginning. Peter Baelish was born with a chronic condition that is incurable in Westeros. He was born insignificant. His father was a minor lord of tiny lands on the Fingers, the most sparsely populated and barren patch of land in the east of the Vale of Arryn. No army, no gold, no name spoken with respect. The nickname Littlefinger itself says it all. It was coined by a young boy named Edmure Tully, who mocked where the guest had come from. But the name stuck, and Peter wore it his entire life.
His father sent the boy to be fostered at Riverrun, the seat of House Tully, hoping that friendship with one of the great houses would open at least some doors. And doors did open, just not the right ones. Living at Riverrun were Lord Hoster's two daughters, Catelyn and Lysa. Catelyn was the eldest, beautiful, self-assured, red-haired, and blue-eyed. Peter fell in love with her the way people fall in love when they've realized too early that they will never have what they want most. He was nobody to her. She didn't even truly see him as a brother, just a guest, just Littlefinger. In the books, Catelyn remembers him with slight awkwardness. Yes, he was there. Yes, he looked at her differently than a foster brother should, but she treated him like a younger sibling and never took him seriously. That in itself is painful enough, but it gets worse. When Catelyn was betrothed to Brandon Stark, the heir to Winterfell, Peter challenged him. A 15-year-old boy fought a duel against a 20-year-old warrior. It was madness. Brandon Stark cut him from ribs to hips, and Catelyn begged him to stop so Littlefinger wouldn't be killed. Peter survived, and he remembered both facts, that he had been humiliated and that she had saved him. It was at that moment that the psychology which drove every one of Baelish's steps for the next 30 years was formed. He learned one thing. In their game, the game of swords, armies, and family names, he couldn't win. That meant he needed a different game. His rules, his board. He decided not to fight the system. He decided to use it. When Littlefinger left Riverrun, he already knew what his weapon was. Not steel, not magic, not an army. Information. Debts. People's weaknesses. In Gulltown, Here is a small detail that is often missed on a first reading. Littlefinger started in customs, with tariffs, with the most boring administrative work. But that was exactly where he learned to see where money flowed, who owed whom, who was hiding profits, and who was breaking contracts. Even before he arrived in King's Landing, he already had a network. A small one, but a functional one. Jon Arryn noticed this talent. He brought Peter to King's Landing. He made him master of coin. And in doing so, he committed one of the most costly mistakes in the history of Westeros. Because in King's Landing, Littlefinger found what he had been looking for his whole life. The perfect environment for his method. A place where everyone wants something. Everyone is hiding something. And everyone is willing to pay to keep their secrets. He didn't just work as a treasurer. He created debts where there were none. He financed those he could later control.
he built a network that almost no one saw. At the same time, he did something even smarter. The treasury was full under his watch. Robert spent, yet the money was always there. No one asked unnecessary questions, or almost no one. Later, Tyrion Lannister would discover that Littlefinger had been taking loans in the name of the Iron Throne from the Iron Bank of Braavos, from merchant houses, from anyone willing to lend. The treasury looked full. The debts were astronomical. And Littlefinger had arranged all those debts so that at the right moment, they could crush anyone but himself. This isn't financial activity. It's art. Expensive, cool, unscrupulous, but art. And this is where the part of the story begins after which you will never look at Littlefinger the same way again. Everyone knows that it was Peter Baelish who gave Lysa the poison to kill Jon Arryn. It's a fact that Littlefinger himself didn't deny when Lysa screamed it out in the Eyrie before her death. But most people, when they think about this act, think along these lines. The schemer eliminated a man who was in his way. Convenient, clever, calculating. In reality, it goes much deeper, and it's much more terrifying. The murder of Jon Arryn wasn't just the removal of an obstacle. It was the launch of the entire saga. The only reason Ned Stark ended up in King's Landing at all was Arryn's death and the letter from Lysa that Littlefinger helped write. The letter accused the Lannisters. This forced Catelyn to send her husband south. This triggered Ned's investigation. This led to the betrayal. This led to the execution. This led to the War of the Five Kings. One letter, one line, hundreds of thousands dead. Littlefinger understood one thing. A world where Robert Baratheon is alive, Ned is in Winterfell, the Lannisters run the Red Keep, and the Vale is held by the Arryns is a stable world. A stable world is deathly dangerous for him. In a stable world, Littlefinger remains what he is, a convenient financier with a dark past and no prospects. He needs chaos, not a little chaos, total chaos. Furthermore, he killed Jon Arryn using Lysa's hands. He almost never killed with his own. He provided poisons, created conditions, and directed the chain of events. But there was always at least one person between him and the death. That too is part of the strategy. No direct traces, no witnesses. Only the logic of events, which is impossible to track. And pay attention to this. After killing Jon Arryn, Littlefinger immediately began helping Ned investigate that very same murder. He gave him leads, he directed the investigation, he pointed to the right people. This isn't just cynicism, this is masterclass manipulation. He didn't just kill, he took control of the investigation into his own crime. And all the while, he looked like an ally. When Ned Stark uncovered the secret of Cersei's children and told Littlefinger of his intention to place Stannis on the throne, Baelish offered an alternative. Seat Joffrey on the throne and rule from the shadows. Ned rejected this as treason, and Littlefinger betrayed him, personally. With a knife to his throat, he uttered the phrase he had once dropped as a warning. "I did warn you not to trust me." In the book, this scene is harsher. Littlefinger doesn't just betray him, he does it at the very moment when it seems Ned is about to win. And the entire City Watch switches to the side of those who pay. And Littlefinger was the one paying. That is why, by the way, Ned turned to him. Littlefinger controlled the funding of the Watch. Ned asked for help from the very person who betrayed him. That is no coincidence. Littlefinger created that dependency on purpose many months prior. Ned walked into a trap, not knowing that the trap had been set by the person he trusted most in that city. Here is the chain reaction that all of this triggered. Ned is arrested. Joffrey is declared king. Robb Stark raises the North. The War of the Five Kings begins. Littlefinger becomes indispensable because in the heat of war, no one controls money like he does. He receives Harrenhal, one of the most significant holdings in Westeros, albeit a cursed one. He woos Lysa. He gains the Vale. From a nobody from the Fingers, He became the Lord Protector of one of the richest and most impregnable regions of the continent. On paper, it looks like a triumph. A man of no significance became one of the most influential lords in Westeros in just a few years. It seems like proof that his strategy worked. But there is one detail he seems to have failed to calculate. The war he launched killed Catelyn, the very woman for whom, if you believe his own words, everything was started in the first place. Remember this fact. It will return to us later and explain his third decision, the most unexpected of all. Take a man who spent 20 years building plans and watch how he acts at a key moment. The first decision, the murder of Aaron, was cold and calculated. The second, the betrayal of Ned, was surgical and harsh. Both were executed with surgical precision and a minimum of emotion. But Littlefinger's third decision is completely different. He takes Sansa. In the show, it looks like another tactical move. Take a valuable piece and use it as a tool. But in the books, his motivation is written almost openly, and what is written there changes everything. Sansa is Catelyn, not metaphorically. Baelish literally sees the mother in her. He looks at a young, red-haired girl with tully blue eyes and sees the woman he never got. That is exactly why he smuggles her out of King's Landing before the Purple Wedding. That is why he calls her Elaine Stone, his natural daughter. That is why his plan in the Vale is built around her and not someone else.
And here begins the most difficult part of the analysis, because the book Littlefinger and the show Littlefinger diverge fundamentally at this point. In the show, Baelish gives Sansa to the Boltons. It is a catastrophic decision that many critics considered incompatible with Roose Bolton, without any guarantees, without receiving anything real in return. It contradicts everything we know about how Littlefinger makes decisions. The show sacrificed the character's logic for the sake of plot convenience. That doesn't happen in the books. In the books, Sansa is still in the Vale. Under the name Elaine Stone, she is betrothed to Harold Harding, the heir to the Vale, known as Harry the Heir. Littlefinger is constructing a multi-stage scheme. When the current Lord of the Vale dies, Harry will become the ruler. Sansa will be his wife. Then, Littlefinger will reveal her true identity. The Northmen will recognize the Stark heir. The Vale will unite with the North, and Baelish will have an army and a territory from which he can move forward. This is much smarter. Book Littlefinger is in no rush. He is raising Sansa as a player, teaching her to read people, to understand politics, to pretend. In one of the chapters, already thinking under the name Elaine, she notices how Littlefinger manipulates the situation and begins to understand the mechanics. He is creating a protege, and he does so without realizing what it might turn into. But the book version of Littlefinger also carries the same systemic flaw. He builds everything around Sansa, whom he sees as a copy of Catelyn. He uses the girl as a piece on the board. But it is obvious that she is not just a piece to him. She is something more. And it is precisely this personal attachment that is the crack through which instability seeps into his plans. Because a good player does not get attached to their pieces. Tywin Lannister didn't get attached to anyone. Varys didn't get attached. They could sacrifice anything for the sake of their goal. Littlefinger could not sacrifice Sansa. And that means his entire chaos at some point began to revolve around a single point he did not control. A good player does not fall in love with their strategy. They do not get attached to individual pieces on the board. They do not allow the past to dictate their decisions. Littlefinger violated all three rules simultaneously. And yet, he considered himself the coldest mind in Westeros. In this paradox, perhaps, lies the very essence of his tragedy. And that is only half the picture, because there is something else that is almost never talked about. The most beautiful and honest description of Littlefinger's strategy came in a conversation with Varys in the Iron Throne Room in the third season. Littlefinger said, "Chaos isn't a pit. Chaos is a ladder. Many who try to climb it fail and never get to try again. The fall breaks them, and some are given a chance to climb. They cling to the realm or the gods or love, illusions. Only the latter is real.
the climb is all there is. Tywin Lannister, by the way, responded to this philosophy even earlier in a scene with Arya at Harrenhal. When Littlefinger came to him and allowed himself to muse about crisis as an opportunity, Tywin cut him off with weary disdain. "You speak of it as if you were the first clever man in history. Yes, a crisis is an opportunity. What else clever will you tell me today?" In this brief reaction, Tywin provides an accurate diagnosis of Littlefinger's entire philosophy. Littlefinger was right in his observations, but he was wrong about the scale of his certainty. And most importantly, he was wrong about the nature of the tool he was using. Chaos does indeed provide opportunities to the one who sowed it, but the problem is that chaos, once unleashed, does not listen to the one who unleashed it. It is not a tool. It is a force of nature. You can set a forest on fire. You cannot control where the fire will go, who it will burn, where it will stop, and what it will destroy along the way. Littlefinger started the War of the Five Kings. The war killed Catelyn. That was not part of the plan. Littlefinger gave Sansa to the Boltons in the series and lost her for 2 seasons. That was also not part of the plan. Littlefinger tried to sow discord between Sansa and Arya at Winterfell in the 7th season, and for the first time in 30 years, miscalculated the people involved. That is also chaos, only now it is no longer his.
That is the systemic flaw in Baelish's strategy. The method worked while the system was relatively stable. Littlefinger knew how to destabilize stability. But as soon as stability collapsed for real, his toolkit proved useless. He was used to working in a world where the rules were clear, even if unspoken. In a world where the Iron Throne stands and everyone fights for it. In a world where money decides. In a world where information is power. The War of the Five Kings destroyed that world. Or rather, Littlefinger destroyed it himself. And in the new world that emerged from the wreckage, his old rules stopped working. Take a specific example to understand the scale. Littlefinger killed Jon Arryn. This caused Ned to come to the capital. Ned began an investigation. Littlefinger directed the investigation so that Ned would find exactly what Littlefinger needed him to find. Then he betrayed him at the right moment. Then he offered Cersei an alliance. Then he received Harrenhal. Then he married Lysa. It all worked. It worked perfectly. And then real instability began. Robb Stark captured Jaime. Littlefinger did not control Robb. Lysa Arryn began to lose her mind faster than he anticipated. Tyrion began to run the small council and quickly realized the treasury was empty. The Red Wedding happened without his participation. Daenerys was sailing to Westeros with 3 dragons. Littlefinger did not plan for any of these variables. Each subsequent move was slightly less controllable than the previous one, because the chaos was growing, and at some point, Littlefinger was no longer conducting the orchestra. He was just trying to survive in the cacophony he had composed himself. Compare this to how Tywin thought. Tywin understood one thing. Even in the heat of war, you need 1 or 2 links in the chain that you control absolutely. Tywin controlled Janos Slynt with the gold cloaks. Tywin controlled Walder Frey through promises. Tywin did not try to control the entire war. He controlled a few key points, and that was enough. Littlefinger tried to control the entire system through instability. That is impossible by definition. An unstable system, upon reaching a certain threshold, begins to control itself. But there is one more person worth comparing Littlefinger to. A person who is usually placed next to him as his opposite. And this comparison changes the angle of view on both. But before moving on to him, pay attention to one more detail. In the conversation with Varys in that same 3rd season, Littlefinger says, "Only the ladder is real. The climb is all there is." The version without the ladder metaphor sounds different. He says, everything else is an illusion. This means the ladder is not an illusion. The ladder is reality. But what is Littlefinger's ladder? It is chaos. It is instability. It is the destruction of order. He declared destruction to be reality, and everything stable to be an illusion. And here is the paradox. Any ladder requires a foundation.
You cannot build a ladder in mid-air. You need a floor to push off from. You need a wall to lean it against. You need at least some structure for the climb to be possible. Littlefinger destroyed the structure, and his ladder lost its support. This is not a poetic metaphor. This is a literal description of what happened. He destroyed the very system he was climbing. Littlefinger and Varys. Their confrontation is one of the main narrative engines of the entire saga. They are usually described as chaos versus order, personal versus public, instinct versus system. But if you look closer, the picture is more interesting. Varys and Littlefinger are, in a sense, mirrors. Both were born as nobodies. Both reached power without an army and without a name. Both use information as a weapon. And both, in the end, lost. They just lost for different reasons, and that difference is important. Varys lost because he could not choose between his idea of a just world and the person he chose for that world. He bet on Daenerys for too long, then switched his bet to Jon too slowly. In the end, the Queen burned him. This is the defeat of a strategist who overestimated the controllability of people and the events around them. Littlefinger lost differently. His mistake was not in tactics, not in a specific decision. The mistake was in the concept. He believed that chaos was a tool that could be used like a scalpel, precisely, carefully, at the right moment. But chaos is not a tool. Chaos is a state of the system in which probabilities stop working the way you expect. Varys had a motive outside of himself. He wanted a better world. He wanted a good king. This made him vulnerable in terms of choosing people, but it gave him stability of intent. He always knew why he was doing it. Littlefinger did not know. That is his main tragedy. He told different people different things: power, Catelyn, the throne, the game. But none of these explanations were complete. If you remove Catelyn as a motive, his actions lose their meaning. But if you keep Catelyn as a motive, his actions become self-destructive because the chaos he unleashed for her sake killed her. There is a difference between a person without principles and a person without a goal. Varys was without principles, but with a goal. Littlefinger was smarter than Varys in tactics, but he had no goal that would justify all the tactics. Only the ladder, only the climb, only the game. And in a game without a goal, sooner or later, there comes a moment when you don't know which next move is the right one. And then you start making mistakes. There is one more difference between them that is worth mentioning. Varys knew he was vulnerable. He spoke about it openly. He understood that he had no army, no name, no protection, other than information and a web of agents. He lived with that fear and worked within it. Littlefinger, on the contrary, was confident in his invulnerability. He believed he read people better than Varys, that his network was more reliable, that he reacted faster. This confidence became his weak point. A person confident in their invulnerability stops checking for points of failure. They stop asking the question, what if I'm wrong about this person? What if this player doesn't succumb to standard reading? What if the next move isn't the one I'm expecting? Varys asked these questions his whole life. That is exactly why he lived so long. That is exactly why he was so hard to catch. Littlefinger did not ask. That is exactly why Bran was able to surprise him. But there is one more twist in this story that almost no one notices. And now about the end, about how Littlefinger died in the series, and why there is something in that death, for all its poetic justice, that gives one no peace. In the 7th season, Baelish tries to pit Sansa and Arya against each other. He plants a letter that Sansa wrote in the 1st season under duress. He whispers to Sansa that Arya wants to take her place. He tries to play on old grievances and childhood fears. He plays out a scheme that was supposed to isolate Sansa from her only allies and bind her to him. This is a small game, petty, incommensurate with the scale of everything he did before. And that in itself is telling. Littlefinger, who 20 years ago was starting wars, is now trying to pit two sisters against each other using schoolyard methods. Either he has weakened or he has no other tools left. Most likely, it is both. Critics rightly point out that Littlefinger's finale in the show was poorly written. He too easily fails to notice that Arya and Sansa are outplaying him. He overestimates his value to the Stark family. He underestimates how much Bran has changed. The writers sacrificed character logic for the sake of a plot twist. But here is what is fundamentally important. The key flaw isn't that he failed to spot the scheme. The key flaw is that he encountered a player he couldn't read in principle. Bran, the three-eyed raven, is no longer an ordinary human. He has no desires in any understandable sense. He has no fears that can be exploited. He sees the past. He has seen everything. All his life, Littlefinger read people through their vulnerabilities. Lysa loved him. Catelyn felt something akin to pity for him. Ned was too honest. Cersei was too afraid. Tyrion was too smart and too lonely. Every person had a pressure point. Bran had none. He observed the world like a man who has already died looks at the living, without desires, without fears, without vulnerabilities. When Bran quoted his own words back to him from a conversation with Varys that took place many years ago, a conversation no one but Varys heard, something akin to genuine fear crossed Littlefinger's face. Not the fear of death, the fear of understanding. He had met a player he could not. Arya slit his throat with the very Valyrian steel dagger he had once attributed to Tyrion to sow discord between the Starks and Lannisters, and which he later handed to Bran himself, apparently unaware of the symbolism of that gesture. A closed circle. The weapon he used as a tool at the very beginning returned to him at the end. Think for a second about that knife. Littlefinger used it in the first season to accuse Tyrion of attacking Bran. It was a lie intended to pit the Starks against the Lannisters. It worked. Catelyn arrested Tyrion. The chain reaction began. Later, the knife passed through several hands, and Littlefinger gave it to Bran. Perhaps as a gesture of goodwill. Perhaps because he decided a cripple in a chair wasn't dangerous. Perhaps for another reason. It doesn't matter. The knife with which he started the saga's first conflict killed him at the end of the 7th season, in the hands of Arya, whom he considered a tool to pressure Sansa. Everything came full circle. In the books, let us remember, Littlefinger is alive. He is in the Vale. He continues to play out his scheme with Sansa and Harry the Heir. Martin has not yet written his end. But in the books, Littlefinger has more layers, more cold calculation, and fewer obvious mistakes. If one tries to predict what his book ending will be, it is worth looking at what Martin teaches time and again. In his world, those who build power on emotions are doomed. Tyrion saved Shae, and it nearly killed him. Cersei protected her children, and it was the children who became her weak spot. Littlefinger loved Catelyn, and that is exactly what turned against him. Sansa is learning. She is becoming better. In the preview chapter of The Winds of Winter, she is already manipulating Harry. She already understands the mechanics. She has become the student who surpassed the teacher. And most likely, it will be she, not Arya or Bran, who puts an end to Littlefinger's story in the books. But this is a theory, not canon, and we will know the answer when Martin finally finishes the book. There are a few things about Littlefinger that are usually overlooked, and they change the understanding of the entire character. Let's start with the nickname. Petyr Baelish received it from Edmure Tully in childhood as a mockery, from the smallest of the fingers, a nobody from a nowhere land. He accepted this nickname. He didn't reject it, he didn't try to replace it. He wore it like a banner his whole life. This is an important detail. All his life, Littlefinger built himself through the mockery of his origins. He turned humiliation into fuel, as if to say, yes, I'm from there, so what? Look where I am now. This is the psychology of a man who never stops proving himself, not to himself, to others, to the ghost of Brandon Stark, who cut him while a girl begged him to stop. There is a theory among book readers that I find interesting, though it is a theory, not canon. According to it, Littlefinger never truly wanted the Iron Throne. The throne requires maintaining order, and order kills Littlefinger as a player. His true desire was an endless game, endless ascension. Not the summit, but the ladder. This explains something about his behavior. He found himself in a position to take real power several times, and each time he preferred to remain in the shadows. In the Vale, he is Lord Protector, but not the Lord. In King's Landing, he is Master of Coin, but not the Hand. He moved toward the throne, but never sat on it. If this theory is correct, Littlefinger had no final goal. There was only the road. And then his systemic defect looks even deeper. A man without a goal cannot choose the right moment to stop, and he who does not stop eventually falls off the ladder. There is another parallel worth noting. Some scholars of Martin's work draw a line between Littlefinger and real historical figures, Cardinal Richelieu in France and Thomas Cromwell in England. Both knew how to manage the system from within without formally holding the highest post. Both created such personal power that they became more dangerous than kings, and both eventually fell when the monarch felt threatened by their influence. Littlefinger follows this same archetype, a gray cardinal who, at some point, ceases to be gray, and then he starts to be noticed, which in itself is a death sentence. There is something else that few notice. In his conversation with Varys, Littlefinger listed 3 illusions that the weak cling to: the state, the gods, and love. He rejected all 3, but he fell in love anyway, with Catelyn, then with Sansa as an image of Catelyn. He clung to love more tightly than to any ladder. Littlefinger declared love an illusion, but love governed him more than he was willing to admit. In this, perhaps, lies the most honest mirror of his entire path. He rejected what was actually his only true motivation, and this contradiction between what he declared and what actually drove him is the main crack in the structure. And now, the main thing. The question I have been intentionally putting off. Was Littlefinger a villain? It would seem everything is obvious. He killed Jon Arryn, he betrayed Ned, he manipulated Lysa, he killed Lysa. He tried to pit the Starks against each other. He is responsible for an entire war. The list is long. But Martin's world is structured in such a way that the question, villain or not, almost never has a clear-cut answer. And here too. Littlefinger is a cruel, calculating, dangerous man. He is indeed responsible for the deaths of a vast number of people, although most of them did not die by his hand, but as a result of the chain he set in motion. The War of the Five Kings, with its hundreds of thousands of dead, began in his office. That is not an exaggeration. But he had no other path. This is also a truth that is hard to ignore. Westeros, as Martin created it, is a system in which a man without a name, without an army, and without money simply does not exist. Littlefinger was not born into a family that gave him a chance. He created himself from nothing, even if by methods that destroyed other lives. The parallel with Tyrion here is not accidental. Tyrion was also unwanted in a system that despised him. Tyrion also sought a path through intellect, not force. But Tyrion made choices in favor of people he liked, in favor of justice as he understood it. Littlefinger made choices in favor of one person he loved, Catelyn, then Sansa as her shadow. This is not magnanimity, but it is not pure villainy either. It is an obsession that destroyed everything around it, including the very possibility of obtaining what it all started for. Littlefinger did not lose because he was a villain. He lost because his concept was wrong from the very beginning. Chaos is not a ladder. Chaos is a fire. You can set a forest on fire. You cannot control the fire. If you strip away everything that happened and look at Peter Baelish as a man, not a player, a simple story emerges. A boy fell in love with a wrong girl. He was humiliated. He decided to become strong in the only way that seemed possible to him. He spent 30 years creating a world in which he would be protected. And in the end, he created a world in which no one is protected, including himself. The War of the Five Kings killed Catelyn. He himself helped create that war. Sansa, in whom he saw Catelyn, eventually sentenced him. 30 years of effort, and in the end, everything returned to the same bitter result from which it began. He gained nothing. At the beginning of this analysis, I said Littlefinger was losing from the first move. Now, this is literally clear. The first move, the murder of Aeron, launched the war that killed Catelyn, the very person for whom it was all started. The first move already predetermined the end. It's just that 30 years passed between the first move and the checkmate. Chaos is not a pit. Chaos is a ladder. But a ladder built on the lives of others will one day collapse under your weight. Littlefinger knew this. He just thought it would happen to someone else. Write in the comments, did he have a chance to win, or was the defect embedded from the very beginning and no other finale was possible? And subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.